Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. My name is Jason Romano. Thanks for being here on the program today. We're grateful and thankful to our sponsors, Compassion International. It's $38 a month, and it's your chance to release a child from poverty. They have over 66 years of experience and have found the most effective way to care for children in need is through the local church. They partner with more than 7,000 local churches in 25 countries to bring God's love and care to children in need, one child at a time. More than 2 million children are breaking the cycle of poverty for good through Compassion International. Check out the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. It's $38 a month. You and I can release a child from poverty. Consider doing that today with Compassion International. Today on the podcast, we feature a very powerful and emotional interview that was done by our colleague, Dave Dawson, who's a contributing writer for sportsspectrum.com. And Dave wrote a story April 6, 2019 on our website, and it was the 1-year anniversary of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash in Saskatchewan, Canada, April 6, 2018. And Dave conducted an interview for this article with Christina Haugan, the wife of the late Broncos head coach Darcy Haugan. And she lost her husband in the horrific bus crash, and that took the lives of 16 members of that junior hockey team, the Humboldt Broncos, in 2018. Darcy was in his third year as the head coach and general manager of that Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League team, respected by many people for being a man of great character and a man of strong faith in Jesus Christ. And Dave conducted this interview with Darcy and reached out and said, "Hey, would you want to play this interview as part of your podcast?" And I listened to it, and I know the story and the power behind this story, especially the idea of forgiveness, which I have been a part of for the last year or so talking about. And I think this interview will help a lot of people kind of enter into a place of forgiving those that may have hurt them, or forgiving those that did something wrong to them, and something that happened in their life. And so many of us struggle with forgiveness. So take a listen to this interview with Dave Dawson, a contributing writer for Sports Spectrum, interviewing Christina Haugan, the wife of the late Broncos head coach Darcy Haugan, the Humboldt Broncos, in the midst of a year or so later after that horrific bus crash in Saskatchewan, Canada. Take a listen to that interview here on Sports Spectrum.
And now joined by a very special guest, Christina Haugan, the wife of the late Humboldt Broncos head coach Darcy Haugan. Christina, the first question I have for you, I guess, is can you describe your faith background, and were you raised in a Christian home?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church with what I believed was two Christian parents. I found out later in life that my dad actually became a Christian quite later in life, but he always went to church with us, so I never actually knew any different. And my dad actually had a very, very major stroke when I was 14, and he was left severely brain injured. So I grew up then after that with a brain injured dad, and I was angry at the church. I didn't feel that they supported us well as a family. And in hindsight, it's from a very immature adolescent perspective, different things. But that did kind of, there was a deep-seated, I lost a lot of faith, and I lost a lot of, I guess maybe trust in people and within the church. At that time, I was still a Christian, and I was still, I still went to church every Sunday and did that sort of stuff. But life at home was hard, obviously. I had a mom that was working a couple jobs to try to support 4 children and take care of a brain-injured father. So life at home was hard. So my mom recognized that, how difficult it was for me. I have an older sister, but she graduated the year after my dad got home from the hospital. So I was kind of the oldest sibling at home, helping with younger siblings, and she recognized that I needed to get away. So she sent me to Cairnport for grade 12. And then I went to 1-year Bible school and decided that was it for me. And I went to SIAS for a year. It's like a year off. I lived with my roommate from Briarcrest. But, and then at that time I was just going to go into the workforce, and my mom really said, I really feel like you need to go back to Briarcrest or finish off a degree there, do something. So I agreed eventually. Took a little bit of talking, and then that was the year I met Darcy when I went back. So I've always been so grateful that she convinced me to go back there. And that was probably the year where it actually, a lot of it started, like going to Cairnport for grade 12 and the year of Bible school. It was really nice because I finally had some support as far as like Christian friends and that sort of thing, which is huge when you're that age and just trying to get through life and do all that stuff, to have some support that way. So that was, that was a good turning point as far as that, to be able to have some of that support. But it was probably the year that I went back that it started to become more real and more, more personal for me, and not just maybe because I've always known that life and I've always lived that life. That being said, I've always struggled in trust. I've always struggled in some of my faith, and Darcy was kind of that backbone to us. He was the one that always, he was always encouraging, and he never, you could question things and he didn't make you feel bad about it. He didn't make you feel like you were failing as a Christian if you were struggling with something, or you were, like today I don't have the faith that I feel like I should have, or I don't have. And he was just always that very, very stable, very supportive person, because his faith, he just seemed so strong in that and so firm in everything he believed. And he lived his life the same way. I feel like the way he lived his life was exactly how he thought. He lived his life with a high moral compass, with impeccable ethics, in a world where that's difficult. Like in the hockey world, there's so many things that you could do unethically, that you could do, you're in this world, this vortex of stuff it's a hard world. It's a hard thing. And yet he still prayed with his team before every game. He did things like that. He held true to what he believed in, who he was, and for me to be able to sit there and just watch this from a front row seat had a huge impact on my life. And then seeing when he became a dad, seeing how he then instilled those beliefs and that, everything that he was into our kids. He did, took the time every night to do devotions with our kids and to do that sort of thing. And I probably got as much out of those devotions as the kids did, those kind of very simple principles and simple things like that. So, and that's what he used to tell our kids all the time. Like, I don't care if you play hockey. I don't care what you do. Just follow Jesus. Just follow Jesus. And that was kind of the thing. And so, whereas I've always believed, I've always had faith somewhat, it's never maybe been tested, because I always had him as my security blanket, always had him there to kind of be the strong one and be that. And then when he wasn't there anymore, his words just kept echoing in me that, I don't care anything except follow Jesus. Make sure you get to heaven. Make sure my kids get to heaven. Make sure that we'll see you again. And so I guess maybe that's where now a lot of my, faith is, I need to step up more and become some of what he did for us, and have a little bit more of that strength. And that's where some of, a lot of the stuff that, everyday stuff that you've been doing with the kids and doing all that stuff, and just even things, everything I tackle now as far as the kids or hockey or dealing with the court case and the driver and any of that stuff, I want to do it in a way that I think would glorify Darcy and would glorify Jesus. So
Wow, yeah, that's super powerful. Thanks so much for sharing that. What's this last year in this faith journey been like for you? And maybe more so in just, chatting with the kids and trying to navigate through that with your children and answering their questions, and less of the questions about the media, more just about answering, questions through the family. And how have you walked through that journey in this last year?
You know what? My kids are phenomenal, and what Darcy had instilled in them is absolutely amazing. When we found out that it was April 6th, and we were kind of waiting for news to hear what had happened and what happened with Darcy, we knew things were bad at that point. We were still just waiting to basically get confirmation that he died. We were quite certain. So we got that phone call while we were driving over to his mom and dad's house. So I got it in the vehicle. So we walked into the house, and I kind of told his parents and the kids. So this is the first that they've heard that this is confirmation that Darcy didn't make it through the accident. And so we were kind of a mess, and there's phone calls, and there's just this big trying to deal with all this and trying to figure all this out. So we were probably there for another 20, 25 minutes, and then just trying to get things done and figure out. So we were going to head home, and we all kind of gathered at the door as we were going to leave. And Darcy's mom said, "We need to pray before we leave." And she said, "Leroy, pray." And he's like, "I have no words. I can't." And Carson put his arm on Leroy, which is Darcy's dad, and said, "It's okay, Papa, I'll pray." So this is a 12-year-old kid at the time that said, "It's okay, Papa, I'll pray." And, just listening to the words that he chose, it was just a very simple prayer. And he basically just said, "God, we don't know why this happened, and we don't know why you've allowed this, but we're going to trust you regardless. And we'll trust that you're going to take care of us through this." And it was just very simple and it sounded very much like something Darcy would say. Darcy he didn't feel the need to use big words and to try to sound very smart and very theological or anything. It was always very down to earth and that sort of thing. So that's, one example. And then on the Sunday, obviously our lives just kind of turned into this huge turmoil, and there was people coming and going, and you weren't sure which direction you were going in the days after that. And Sunday morning came, and the boys came upstairs. They're like, "We need to go to church, Mom." And I was like, I didn't even, it wasn't even something I really processed. I didn't even really know it was Sunday. And they're like, "We need to go to church. Dad would want us to go to church." And so we all went to church. And so, just seeing how grounded and how much faith, I don't think that their faith has really wavered in this, because Darcy just put so much into them. They know that that's the way they need to go, and that's what they need to do. My oldest got baptized, would have been September, I think. Sorry, it all kind of runs together. So he got baptized. So it's just been kind of continually, and being able to just witness kind of in my kids, I guess, has helped my faith, because it helps, me be stronger, just because, see that. And I'm like, if a child can continue to believe and continue to have faith, then you have to, it just kind of gives you that extra push that you need to kind of get up every day and keep going.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think the idea of forgiveness, faith community or not, people can kind of understand the idea of somebody wrongs you, and you're able to offer them a sense of grace in numerous situations. And I think the part that many people in our world are probably curious about is, how did you get to the point in that comment you made in the media earlier in the year, once that court case had been going on, that you came to the point of forgiving that bus driver? What was that process of forgiveness like for you, and how did you come to that point?
Well, obviously when it first all came down, there was moments, I shouldn't say I was an angry person, but there was moments of extreme anger and just questioning and trying to understand all of this. And, you know, I guess the anonymity of him, like not knowing who he was or any of that sort of stuff doesn't help either. But it wasn't until I went to write my victim impact statement, which wasn't too long before the court. Like, I think we had to have it submitted maybe a few weeks before. So it was probably a month before that first court date that I actually finally sat down to write my victim impact statement. And the first one I wrote was very different than the one that I read there. It was kind of what I was feeling in that moment. And I was writing it out, like actually on paper. I was sitting at my kitchen table writing this out, and just kind of what I was feeling and thinking. And I knew I was going to probably have to change some things, but you know, you got to start somewhere. And I wrote a statement and said, in reality, no punishment they can give you will be enough. And I sat there and I just burst into tears and just sat there and cried and thought, you know, it just kind of reminded me of Jesus forgiving us. And I was like, you know what? There is nothing we can do. Like, he forgives us and he loves us regardless of all our sin. And, you know, I just sat there and I was like, you know what? I've been forgiven when I didn't deserve it so many times. And not like in the, you know, obviously, you know, Jesus dying on the cross and that, I'm referring to that, but also there's so many times I just could think of so many instances that Darcy forgave me for stupid things and different things, and when I didn't deserve it, it just didn't matter because he loved me and he, you know, would do that. And I just thought Darcy would want me to forgive him. Like, I just sat there and I was like, well, I can't do that. But, you know, you're kind of wrestling in your brain, and I'm like, Darcy would want you to forgive him. And so I kind of scrapped that whole victim impact statement and kind of started out again. And I think for me, forgiveness starts as a very conscious decision. I don't necessarily think that it just goes in line and that you necessarily have all of the emotions or the feelings that go along with the forgiveness before. But I made, at that moment when I sat there with that victim impact statement, I made a very conscious effort that I was going to forgive him because I was not going to live in anger. That was not going to help me. It was going to be a terrible model for my kids. It was probably not even going to make me a very good mother. Like, if you're living in anger and you're all consumed by that, because there was moments when you are so very consumed by how it came about and how unfair it is and how, you know, all of the things around it. And, you know, like, I still struggle. Like, I'm not saying by any means that I'm perfect or that I'm there, but it's kind of like every day you have to make that decision that you're not going to live in anger and that you are forgiving someone. And some days are easier than others to do that. But I feel it's an important step. And I felt it was actually so incredibly freeing for me it was almost like a weight just kind of washed off me the moment I made the decision to forgive him. And you didn't have to be angry anymore. Holding on to that anger was such a weight on me personally. Like, and when I didn't have to do that anymore and you just kind of could let that go, it was just so freeing. And then when I sat in the courtroom and could see him and could see how upset he was and how remorseful I don't believe myself personally that you could fake the kind of emotions and the kind of remorse that man sat there and had. And I watched his wife and his family sit in the row behind him for the entire court, and watched his wife cry and his dad cry. And I don't know, I just could sit there and think, you know, what if that was my husband sitting in that seat? What if he had made a mistake and it was just one of those, you know, and I was in her position instead of my position? And I think that was that was a good step for me too. I had already made the decision that I was going to forgive him before I even got there, before I saw him, before I saw any of them. But it makes it easier when you can see that they genuinely are sorry. And that's kind of how I came about to that. And it's still an everyday battle. Like, it's not something that I think, but every day it gets a little bit easier. And it's not that I'm, I guess, angry, but there's some days where it just, life gets in the way, and life was hard that day. And being a mom was hard that day. And so everything just feels a little bit more difficult. And those are the days where you have to really make that conscious effort that you're not going to live in that pit of anger and that pit of self-pity and feeling sorry for yourself. And you're going to make sure that you are going to do something good with your life, and you're going to, so I think that's something we try very hard to, is to try to, make positive, like, I don't want to talk negative about, there's lots of negative you could go in this accident with the team and all that stuff. We want to kind of focus on the positive and see if there's anything good we can do, and if there's positive things that can come from Darcy's life and Darcy's death. That's where we want to go, and that's where we want to focus.
Yeah, I'd have to agree for sure. Well, Christina's that April 6th 1-year anniversary of the accident, does approach. How do you want people to look back, or how do you rather want people to think of you and pray for you, and what? How do you process the days that are leading up to that, and what's that like to navigate through that process, and how can people encourage you when they think of you and pray for you?
Well, life is hard. I'm not going to tell you that just because we have faith and we're Christians it makes it easier, but I can tell you that having that grounds you is huge. Like, knowing that that's what we can come back to. And I think even just the support that has brought to us, our faith, our church in Humboldt, Sean Brando has supported us, like, in his family and our church family there, and just even other people like have supported us and have kind of held us up when we couldn't. And so having that is enormous. So I think having that faith background and having that support system has helped us huge. And that, like, I want people to see that we're doing okay, that we're, it's one step at a time. It's such a journey. And, people ask if a lot of these individual things and these steps and, like, the court case and now the 1 year, if that's bringing us closure or that's helping us. And I don't think I think closure is such the wrong word to use. Like, all of these things, it's another step in our journey, and it's a step towards some sort of healing, but it's a scar that will always be there. It's something that's never going to go away. Like, my kids have no dad. That's never, ever going to change. That's never going to, and we're going to hurt from this forever, but I want people to see that it doesn't have to, I guess, break you. It doesn't have to, you can make it through these things, and you can, I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see the positive things. I want to see what they can do. That's going to be kind of the silver linings of all of this, is to see what they can become. Because I think that, pain helps you grow too. I think that it can bring you to places that you would never have gotten otherwise. And I'm going to be amazed at the people my boys become, the men that they become one day, partly from dealing with all of this and being able to get through this. And we want to always portray, like, we've been trying really hard to, like, portray, I guess, just a very graceful and appreciative of everything that people have done for us, and just to know that we're getting there.
Yeah. Christina, I think the one thing that people will think of when they think of Humboldt Strong, the hashtag, and they think of across the world, people heard about this accident in Sweden, Australia, non-traditional hockey markets in the U.S., like all across the world, people know about you and your story and Darcy's life. What does that mean to you? What does that mean for that type of platform or that type of reach to be able to share about Darcy's faith and to be able to share about your life?
Well, someone told me shortly after the accident, they said they always knew that people were going to know Darcy Haugan's name, and they just didn't assume it was going to be this way. It was going to be through, his coaching and that sort of thing. And I just, my mom had told me one too. She said, you realize that partially because of Darcy, she said the entire country just heard the gospel message when it was on the vigil and all those different things. She said, like, a lot of that, it was like that the gospel message has been portrayed more in regular stream media than it has in I don't know how long. She said the Prime Minister just sat through the gospel message essentially. And she said, like, the platform and, like, the reach that Darcy has been able to have in his death is, and, like, he would have given up his life to have this much reach, to have this many people be able to hear about Jesus and be able to hear that message. I know he would have. So I guess that's one of the things we cling to is the fact that, it's not for nothing. The impact and the reach and being able to have that, and that's what I guess a lot of my message, anything I do in the media, anything I say and all that stuff I do, I'm more about, I'd like people to know who Darcy was, and I'd like to know what grounded him and his faith and his, just love for Jesus, and that more than his hockey, or more than his hockey, any of that, because he was so much more than hockey. And the epitome of Darcy came down to his love for Jesus and his faith. And so that's what we want to keep going. We want that to keep going. We want to be able to, and if we can use this platform from this tragedy and the Humboldt Broncos and Darcy to keep that message out there and to keep being able to tell people about that, then that's what we want to do and that's what we will do. So,
Christina, is there something that maybe you're reading, whether it be maybe a devotional or maybe a piece of scripture or a story in the Bible? Is there something that you've read recently that you've been kind of clinging to lately?
I haven't honestly been doing a lot of reading lately. Some of my day-to-day things I'm still struggling. But I have been sent a few things different here and there, like, and that kind of resonates a lot to me. It's this kind of reading just today, even about, it was kind of about the Easter story and about Jesus in the tomb, about how they wanted to, and like how you feel so bad in that moment, but when you get to the other side, it's that much better, and that there is, something to look forward to always. So I think that that's kind of where we're at, approaching this 1 year thing, is that, there is light on the other side, and there's been, I don't know how many numerous stories in the Bible where you feel like you're kind of in the pit of hell, and if you can get through that, the other side is that much brighter and sweeter. So that's kind of what we're clinging and hoping to now, I think.
I'd like to ask you about Sean Brando, the chaplain of the Humboldt Broncos, and just what he's meant to you and your family and Darcy over the years that you've been involved with the Broncos organization, and just his faith being blasted out to the world and during the accident, and just what his impact overall and what that's meant to you.
Sean is a phenomenal human being, and as is his wife and his children. They have been absolutely amazing before and after this. Like, they were, equally as amazing to us before this as after. And, you know, I think one of the things I love about Sean and his family is that there's just so little pretense, or like, he is so genuine. There's nothing fake about them at all, him or his family. They, you know, what you see is exactly what you get. If he's struggling or he's questioning, he doesn't pretend to have the answers. He doesn't need to pretend. He doesn't, you know, he's just there. Him and Darcy were very good friends before. They spent lots of hours in the fishing boat together. And, you know, I know Sean, you know, because they were such good friends, Sean misses Darcy desperately. Misses that time that they have together. So he's hurting from all of this too, but yet he's still, you know, the kind of the one that so many people are leaning on, and he's taking that load with such grace, and just, you know, I can't say enough good things about them. Their boys have been phenomenal friends to my boys and his wife, and so they are just incredible people, and some people to kind of aspire to be like. I feel like, you know, that's kind of a picture I keep in my mind, lots of you know, what to aspire to.
Well, Christina, I really just want to thank you just for your openness and your boldness and your transparency through all this. And I imagine that the support that you've been receiving has been exponential, but I just wanted to just say thank you so much. And just, you mind if I just kind of pray a prayer blessing over you throughout this conversation? And why don't we just do that right now? Father, thanks so much for Christina. Thank you for just the journey that you've been writing for her. And Father, thank you for the legacy that Darcy left. And thank you for the story that you've written through his life. So, Lord, I just ask that you'd bless Christina, bless her family, just protect them in their journeys, Lord. And Father, allow that, however you'd like to use this story to glorify your name and to glorify the kingdom, Lord. Father, would you just continue to write that story and write the script, and Lord, that you'd be glorified, that you could accomplish immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine. So, Father, be glorified in this, and thank you for this interview today. In Jesus' name, amen.
And that was Dave Dawson, our contributing writer at Sports Spectrum, interviewing Christina Haugan, the wife of the late Humboldt Broncos head coach, Darcy Haugan. Humboldt Broncos was the junior hockey league team. And if you remember that accident, April 6, 2018, the horrific bus crash that took the lives of 16 members of that junior hockey league team in Saskatchewan, Canada. Difficult circumstances, certainly, for any person to have to go through something like that, leaving behind his wife, Darcy leaving behind his wife, Christina, who just was interviewed here on the podcast, as well as their two boys, Carson and Jackson. Forgiveness is hard. It really is. It's very hard for a lot of people. There's a wonderful quote by C.S. Lewis. I think he says, "Forgiveness is a beautiful thing. We can all agree upon that until we actually have to practice it." And for a lot of us, watching, listening, hearing a story of forgiveness is awesome. But then when you actually have to put it into practice, that's when it becomes a different ball of wax. That's when it becomes a lot harder for us to implement into our daily lives. And you can sense that with Christina when you hear her words, the difficulty of extending forgiveness, although she has. And I loved what she said. Listen, when we really truly look at it from the lens of Jesus Christ, as human beings on this earth walking with the Lord, we've been forgiven every single day. God has offered that forgiveness to us. That's what Jesus went to the cross and did. He paid for our sins, and he sat there on that cross and said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." He extends that forgiveness to us every single day when we ask for it, even though we don't deserve it. So we in turn are to turn around and extend that same forgiveness to others. Matthew 18, the parable of the unforgiving debtor, has a wonderful look at forgiveness and why it's so difficult, and really how Christ looks at forgiveness. It is difficult for us. Some of us have been really hurt in our lives, but it's really a non-negotiable if we're going to call ourselves Christians not to forgive those who've done harm to us or to our family members. And I thought that Christina did a wonderful job in this interview of trying to explain that and share the struggles that she's going through, but the reason and for the hope that lies within her of why she was able to come to a place where she could forgive the person who caused this horrific accident. And just grateful to Dave Dawson for doing this interview, and thanks for him for bringing it to our attention. And thanks for Christina for joining us here on the podcast. We thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. We'll have a brand new episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Check us out on social media and check out our website. And you can read this article that Dave wrote from April 6th or any other article you want to check out over at sportspectrum.com. Have a great rest of your day. We love you guys. See you next time.